This episode of the Operatory podcast is brought to you by HungryDino.com. In less than 3 minutes, you can find out what outdated policies, procedures, and technology you are using and how much it is costing you. Take the quick survey at HungryDino.com. Welcome to the Operatory podcast, the podcast about burying the dinosaurs in dentistry, moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. For the patient perspective, my man, David Pryor. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Brian, I'm freezing to death.
Why? Because it's like negative 30 air temp today?
That's before wind chill, Brian. It's negative 60 air temp outside today.
It's just brutal. And, we were talking before the podcast about how we're getting sick of everybody talking about the temperature. And here we are doing it. But what drives me nuts is that everybody talks about Chicago being like negative 50. And then and by the way, it's negative 60 in Minneapolis. I'm like, just because there's more people freezing there doesn't change the fact that it is 10 degrees colder here.
We're dying.
Yeah. So it's not. It's one of those days where you want to have a car starter on your car so you can warm it up,
yes,
right?
For sure.
So when which fits into today's podcast topic, which is how do you evaluate technology? If it's negative 60 degrees outside, you don't have to put much thought into having a car starter, do you?
No.
You go, I don't want to die when I'm in my car.
Right.
So let's start it before I get in it. Exactly. But that's not the way it is in lots of cases. In dentistry, people freak out. How do this piece of technology, it's expensive. I don't know what to do. So I'm going to share with our listeners today a little tool that they can use to keep in their mind and go, do I want to invest in this technology? When I look at it, I'm like, do I want to build it? Or do I want to buy it? Or do I want to invest in it? These people are doing cool things. I want to be part of it. This is an opportunity that we're going to build for the rest of the industry, or this is a cool technology that I want to invest in my practices. And so I do have a decision filter that I use to go through, and it's very simple. It's a 4-step process, my man.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. And you know about technology, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on these 4 steps.
Okay.
Alrighty. So 4 questions that I use my decision filter for evaluating technology for my practices. Number 1, will it improve the quality of care?
Okay.
I mean, it should be obvious,
Yep.
But that's why it's number 1. But because it's obvious, this is like a light switch. It's either yes or no. There's no kind of, well, maybe it will. And it's just a given. It's got to do it. And I think most dentists focus purely on this one. And I'm talking about things like, does it improve my marginal adaptation? Is the flexural strength better than what I'm using today? Are the aesthetics better? It's very personal sometimes. And if you invest in, let's say, a new type of ceramic.
Yep.
And you go, boy, this looks beautiful. And you post it on the internet to a dental group, you'll start a fight. Dentists will be so critical. Oh my gosh, that sucks, And meanwhile, I can't even remember the last time a patient said something negative about the quality of care in our office. We have to be the gatekeeper, but I think that's the point with the decision filter number 1. Will it improve the quality of care? Obviously, the answer has to be an absolute yes, but I think that's all that dentists focus on.
Okay.
Makes sense?
So they only have one criteria to judge by.
Or they don't think of the other ones, or they think about it, but they don't have a filter to go through. So
Okay.
Yes, number 1, does it improve the quality of care? But if the answer is yes, which it has to be,
Yeah.
that's not the only thing that matters. There's 3 more. Make sense?
Yes.
And keep in mind that number 2 is probably going to be a harder one to evaluate and requires more thought than the quality of care. Because not a lot of stuff enters the market that I've seen recently that it's kind of like phones. Buying a new phone, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Buying a new car, it's going to be reliable. 20 years ago, you bought a car, it may suck. You might get a lemon. Statistically, it's much less now. Same thing as with new technology in dentistry. There's not a lot that comes out that doesn't improve the quality of care for the most part.
Okay.
I mean, there might be a bad adhesive or some kind of, but we're talking about like when it's coming to like recall systems or digital form. If you're not using one, just get one. They all work for the most part. I mean, there's not really a bad one. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Number 2, will it improve the patient experience? This, I believe, also is a must. So quality of care and patient experience, but I don't think most dentists look at it. I know we've got a patient perspective on the podcast to prove this point.
Yes.
That's you.
Yep.
Did you? I don't know if you caught that.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm catching what you're putting down, my man.
Right. So I would implore people, when you're looking at new technology, look at the quality of care, and that should be kind of a quick yes or no. When it comes to improving the patient experience, take notes on how you think patients would perceive it versus how the dental team perceives it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because in today's marketplace, as we talk about all the time, that's important.
Yep.
That's key, is how the patient's perception is. So that's number 2. Number 3 is basically ROI. Will it be cost efficient? And this is one of those things that it could be there's a scale. It's not like quality of care. It's not patient experience. It may not be cost efficient today, but it might have a long-term ROI that you're okay with, or you may be able to put things in place to make it ROI positive. And I, unfortunately, because this is my decision filter, and you know me, I'm not very cost sensitive. I'm trying to say, well, that's a very nice way of saying that.
I'll sum it up with what you always say: it's better to earn a buck than to save a nickel.
Yeah, that is my feeling. And so, I did ceramic training for 10 years before I won ceramic. I'm like, I don't understand why anybody would use this. It's worse in every way. And then somebody said it's the least expensive, and I went, oh, that makes sense. I never look at the cost of anything. I look at big picture things, but I don't, so that's just kind of my blind spot. But the reason why I bought a CT scan was I brought in a surgeon to start placing implants to justify the ROI of the CT scan. So there's ways around it. If you use the decision filter and you still want to blow money on stuff that's not ROI positive, if you're creative, you can figure out a way. That's what I do. I'm not suggesting you do that, but it's not a yes or no. It's a gradient.
I will use that in my sales approach.
Oh, that's great. Well, we are probably hypersensitive on the other end when we're like so underpriced on our products. It seems like, and everybody tells us that because these are my decision filters. So when we're developing technology, it has to go through all 4 of these. It has to be a complete no-brainer. Otherwise, why are we building it? Right.
Yep.
So that's a very good point that I didn't even think of when I brought up this topic of the 4 decision filters. So quality of care, improving the patient experience, is it cost efficient? And number 4 is, will it make life easier for my team?
Yeah.
So does it reduce friction versus cause friction in your office? And this doesn't necessarily need to be a plus, but again, it's like cost.
Yeah.
There might be a learning curve. It's one of the factors you have to put into place.
Yeah.
Some things like, if it makes your life easier for a team and it's cost effective and it improves the patient experience and it improves the quality of care, like digital forms or, paperless charts or, the many of the things that we talk about on the podcast, just like, why doesn't everybody do it this way? It's because when we go through these 4 decision filters, it's an absolute yes to all 4, game on. There's no reason not to do it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I assume that there's different weightings to the 4 different items. So your first one has a different weighting in it than the second, then the third, and then finally the 4th.
No. I mean, yes, I wouldn't call it a weighting, because a weighting means that making it life easier for my team is not as important as being cost effective, for example. Right? That's not how I would look at it. I would look at it as the first 2, yes or no. Right.
Okay.
It makes it easier. It improves the quality of care, and and it improves the patient experience,
Okay.
right? It
So-
doesn't
so
matter
it's-
if it's
it's
a
a
little
switch.
bit or it's a switch.
It's a switch. So it improves patient care or it improves the patient experience, yes or no, and then you move on to the next two, and then it's more subjective.
Exactly. So
Got it.
the first two are like a flow chart. Yes, no.
Yeah.
If no, then stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, yeah.
The next two are like if no, then how. Right. that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Like in the case of the CT scan. Yeah. If not cost effective, how can we make it cost effective
Yes.
for our office?
Yep.
If we really want to, if it, and to your waiting, it really improves the patient experience. It really improves the quality of care. Let's figure a way to yes for the other two.
Right.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, that's the decision filter. Hope it's useful for you. Let us know if it is, and if you have any additional filters that you use to evaluate technology at theoperatory.com. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Brian. Have a great one.
I also want to remind you to rate and review us wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you have suggestions or comments, please visit theoperatory.com and drop us a line. Again, I'm Dr. Bryan Laskin, host of The Operatory. Thanks for listening. I look forward to speaking with you next week.